This becomes important because the question is, why would we want to declare data fields private in the first place? All right. Well, we might not want to give users an opportunity to change data fields to whatever they want them to be. Okay. If we had a data item, let's say you had a class called product. Okay, so you guys know that we're continuing our store program, right? So let's say we had a product object, okay, and our customer, not our customer, our employee can set the price of that product. Do we want them to be able to set the price to a negative value? What do you think? Does that sound like a reasonable thing? The price of a Snickers bar is we pay you. The price of a Snickers bar is we pay you to take it. Does that seem reasonable? Nope. Did I lose you? Yeah, no, right. It doesn't seem reasonable. I'd like that, right? I would like it if they paid me to take products from stores, right? So, but what stops them if we give them direct access? If we give our employees direct access to the data fields of the product class, there's nothing that stops them from changing it to whatever they want. Okay? So what we do is we make our data fields, we make our attributes private, but then we use public methods to change those values. So let's take a look at an example here. Okay. So here we have the minus sign indicates a private modifier. All right. So radius is private. All right. Radius is private, but we use methods getRadius to get the value, to return the radius value of the circle, and setRadius to give a new value for the radius. Now inside of the setRadius method, if our user, if our employee or whatever, if they put a negative value in there, we can choose not to change the value. Right? So if they put a negative value in there, we simply don't change the value. And then that way, it's not possible for them to set it to a negative value. We can use that to maintain that security. Okay, so we'll see an example in the circle with a private data fields. Okay, just like we were able to pass arrays to methods, the same thing is true here. Right, we can pass a reference for a circle to a method. Right, so here we pass this by value using an integer primitive type. Using a reference to an object, we can pass the reference to that object. So it works just like arrays in that one. We can create an array of objects. You guys remember last semester I said we can create pretty much an array of anything. An array of ints, an array of doubles, an array of strings. Strings are objects, by the way. We can create an array of strings. We can create an array of arrays. Right? Well, now we can create an array of objects. So basically, it creates an array of reference variables, each pointing to its own object. Okay? Same thing. We do it the same way we created arrays of other types. What is the type? Bracket. Give me a name, right? Give me an array name. A new object type. That. Okay. I'm sure somebody's out there thinking right now, I still do not understand. Why do we have to write circle and then circle? Like, why do we have to write it twice? It is important. And when we get to inheritance, we will talk about that. Okay? For now, just know that You need to write it here and here. Okay, we'll talk about why later. Okay. Now, we did talk last semester about how strings are immutable. Immutable is a fancy word that means it cannot be changed. Okay, so strings cannot be changed. Those of you who have C programming experience, you might remember that strings in C, I could change a character in a string in C. Could not do it in Java. It doesn't change the character. If you were to replace or replace characters or something like that, it creates a new string. That's because strings are this fancy word immutable. They are not able to be changed. I'm getting there. Oh. Object arrays. They all point to null initially. Okay. Let me do something real quick to show you, because that's a good question. Saeed or Murat? Which do you go by? Do you go by Saeed or Murat? Good question, Murat. So let me hope this is from my last lecture. Okay, so I was on. You can call me Joseph Hoja. So we're in Turkey. All right, let's see. Because I want to go back because that's a good question. So the question is, do all of these point to null, or does it create default circle objects? It points them all to null initially. So if you were to do that, okay, then it would create two circle objects where array of 0 points to null and array of 1 also points to null. Okay, so points to nothing, no space in memory. Okay, now you could also, though, just like we did with other array types, now, what this would do is this would make array of 0 point to a circle with radius 1. And array of 1 point to a circle of radius 5. So I can create a new circle object and put it into the first place in the array. I can create a new circle object, point it and put it into the second place in the array. Okay. All right. So this, if you remember, was the way to initialize an array. Oh yeah, you're fine. Ozan, you're fine. So this would be like when we initialized an integer or double array with values, right? Same thing here. We're initializing an array with values. Here, just sets those values to null. Okay, sets those pointers to null. Okay. That's a good question. Great question. Okay, back to immutable objects. Now, an immutable object would be something like this, where the student, okay, sorry, this is actually an example of something that looks immutable but is not, and here's why. So an immutable object means that all private data fields, right, and without mutators, Okay, mutator is a fancy word that means can be changed. So there's two words they use. They call accessors and mutators. Let me write those terms out because you may see them. I don't like using big words. Okay, accessors and mutators. Okay, mutators is a way to change something. Accessors is a way to get something or access something. We normally call these getters and setters. Okay, and here's why. Because so a circle has a radius, right? Has a radius value. What we would do is we would create a private data field called radius. Then we would create a public method that returns the radius type, and we call it get radius, and it takes no parameters. Okay. All this method does is it gets that private value and returns it. Okay. We would also create a public method that doesn't return a value. Call it set radius. Now it takes a parameter. Is our new radius value. Okay, so it takes the radius value and sets it. So this is why we call them getters and setters, because we get the radius value and we set the radius value. Okay, the fancier words are accessors and mutators. Okay, so why is that important? Why did I say all that? Because an immutable object means it cannot be changed, meaning there can't be any setters. We can't set values because we aren't allowed to change the values once it's created. Notice that the string class does not have any set methods. Okay. Also, there's all the data fields must be private, so we can't change any of the data fields through direct access. But the following example is not immutable, meaning it can be changed, and here's why. Okay. We have a student class, private data field, no setters. Okay, so we would think, this is an immutable object. I can't change this, right? But notice that the birth date class, all of its method is private. All of its data fields are private, but it does have a setter. Now, because the student object, once it's created, I could get their birth date and I could change the year. That means that I can change data inside of the student object. And because I can change data inside of the student object, it's not immutable, meaning it can be changed. Okay. This is a little bit more of a higher level topic. So there's not necessarily a need to know too much about this because you won't be necessarily knowing lots of immutable objects, but noticing whether or not a class can or cannot be changed can make for nice exam and quiz questions. Just putting that out there. Okay. All right. All data fields must be private and no set methods. And there can't be any accessor or any get methods. But no set methods. Okay, and then we're going to take out this word as well because that's a fancy word. And no